Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us on Between Us Girls radio show on Radio Mayak in Atlanta. This is a part 2 of Churching Topic, and we had a wonderful discussion for Church Part 1, Churching Part 1. So we wanted to continue just because there's so much to talk about. We started talking about dress code and sitting on different sides, and we just carried away and didn't have enough time to discuss all the other great topics. Yeah,
it's a
great
very
points.
Sensitive and intimate because everyone does it differently, and it's a very personal topic for sure.
Yes, so I'm excited to discuss other things that we didn't get to talk about last time.
Yes.
But before we go into that, I just wanted to touch up on a few things from Part 1. So we talked about mega church versus a small church, family church, and involvement in church. We also talked about dress code, so we'll be posting church in Part 1 so you can hear that and kind of see what we talked about, and you'll understand what we're continuing on a Part 2.
Yes, get a better idea. And if you're just joining us a little bit later, this is Between Us Girls Radio. We're so glad you're here. Please kick off the heels. We are drinking coffee and eating banana bread. So please make yourself some, or tea. Put on sweatpants, whatever you're comfortable. Just take a seat. Come sit with us for just a little bit, just for the hour to hear. And you're listening to Tati.
Tama.
And this is Alina.
And we're so glad to have Alina back now 2 weeks in, but still, it's nice to be together, the trio. Okay, so let's get into it. Before actually we get into the churching, I want to put in the holiday that is today. It's Halloween.
Yes.
Yes.
The reason I want to talk about it is because I saw a Slavic church doing, I'm not sure what it's called. I guess they're doing like a movement, but they are doing a
campaign.
Movement. Maybe campaign. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I'm talking about a little bit?
Is it a holiday of like light and darkness?
Yes,
I saw that too. What church is doing that?
The church in Jacksonville, Living Stream.
Oh, okay. That's awesome.
Living Stream is the right. Yes,
Living Stream. Yeah.
Yes. So they are doing. So it's like it says Halloween celebrates, and then it shows like darkness. It shows like fear, and then it shows beside it peace, light, and one more word. I can't remember what it is. But then at the bottom it says Jesus is peace, life, and then one more word. And I hate that I can't remember it. I'm sure it'll come back to me. But it's a little bit different. And Halloween is such an interesting holiday because it really doesn't celebrate anything. There's really no point for it. And like, other holidays, you're celebrating like an incredible leader. You're celebrating the birth of Jesus. You're celebrating harvest, the new season. This one is just kind of there. It's not necessarily for fall. It just falls in the season of fall.
I tried reading History of Halloween, and it comes from did not originate.
Right?
Yeah, did not originate in U.S. It was some European country, and it was one day a year when you could call dead from the graves or whatever, their spirits, and talk to them. So family members use that day to like communicate with the loved ones that died, which is creepy.
Tradition.
Yeah,
because back in the day, English ruled the English church. It was, you could not do that at all. Pagans were not wiped out, but it was against the law to be pagan. And so that was their one day. The church and the king was like, okay, we'll give them one day to do this so that we aren't just putting them all in jail. But it's a very interesting, so like now even, it's not even, that holiday isn't even for that anymore. I mean, maybe someone is still doing it, but it's kind of one of those that you're like, oh, that's cute. Like the cute little, there's some costumes that the little ones wear that you're like, oh, that's precious. But it's kind of an iffy topic, especially for Slavics. Do you guys remember your first Halloween in the States?
Yes, I was so scared. We were told not to like go outside.
Oh yeah. Actually, now that I think about it, it was around the time of Halloween, but I probably didn't realize what it was. My mom, she was vacuuming inside the house. I was like 5 years old, 6 years old, 7, something like that. She was vacuuming inside the house, and we were playing outside. And the front door had been locked. And so she didn't hear us, but we were playing outside, and then this boy drives by on his bicycle, and he has the most scariest mask on. And we were terrified, and we started screaming and pounding and yelling, pounding on the door. And I mean, I hate that you guys are laughing because
You're laughing too.
no, because
I'm laughing because we had the same story. I can't wait when you hear me back. Oh, okay.
Yeah, no, I still remember that. I remember the horrifying mask that he had on. It was terrifying. And my mom said that for weeks I could not sleep. I had nightmares, and they had to seriously, like, her and my dad were praying for me all the time because I was having the worst nightmares because of that.
Man, and that kid was probably like, oh no, what did I just do knocking on that door? Because he probably had no idea.
No, I don't think he wasn't trick-or-treating. He was just like riding his bike around the neighborhood with that mask on.
Oh, I thought he knocked on your door.
No.
Oh, gotcha. I was going to say, poor kid. Probably. Oh, man, that's even more terrifying to see that. Yeah, it's an interesting holiday. Nobody, like, when we first came to the States, we didn't even know English. I mean, we had no idea what was going on. When we saw the, like, Have You Seen Me ads at Walmart with the kids, my parents were convinced, because no one tells you this is from the whole state or the whole county, that when you bring your kids to this Walmart, Americans take your kids. And because, I mean, think about it. You're in a foreign country and you see these ads
missing
of
children.
Kids. Yes.
Yeah.
So you think, oh my goodness, do not talk, to Americans. They'll take your kids. But the first Halloween, we had no idea what was going on. And, like, once it gets dark and then you see all these people walking around with these horrifying masks, and no one tells you, oh, it's just like a thing that they do for candy.
Costume. Yeah.
Nobody tells you that. We think, are you kidding me? Is this the end of time? So we go to our basement. We turn off all the lights. My whole family's together, me, my brother, my sisters, my parents, and we're just sitting there crouching, and just every time the doorbell rings, we're terrified because we don't know what that means.
They came for you.
Yes, and the boys, they like to wear the scariest stuff.
Yeah.
So that was our story. Then the following 2 years, we got, and I guess maybe people knew, like, oh, that's the foreign house, so don't go over there. Don't go over there. Scary. So the following years, you know how in our culture you give out oranges for, like, holidays, Christmas. So my mom's giving them fruits at school. All the people are like, your house is so weird. Why are you giving on Halloween, the one day you want candy? So that was our first experience. It was very interesting. I definitely got plenty made fun of because we gave out fruits, but it's an interesting one. So this campaign, I don't know how I feel about it because I like the way they said it, that Jesus is peace and light. And I like the way the church said it because the church stopped there. They did not go into you should not be celebrating. You should be doing this. You should be doing that. But the problem with that is that you have people in the church that share this campaign that is supposed to be not bashing people, but just saying, hey, we're choosing to celebrate this. That have really strong opinions. And some of the posts, I mean, I don't necessarily, go out and celebrate Halloween, but they're angry. Their posts, you're like, man, I don't know if you should post that publicly, even if it's, even if you don't agree with it, that's fine. But
is it the caption that they're adding?
Yeah,
or is it the discussion under it?
The caption, it's rough. I mean, it's got some, like, very hateful, like, if you celebrate this, you are this.
So it's not the church that's promoting the caption. They're just promoting that campaign.
Yes.
And I do remember it says Halloween celebrates, and then it says death or life. And then the check mark next to death is checked. And then it says fear or peace. And then it's the check mark for fear is marked. And then there's one more. I do remember.
I don't remember the last one.
But I mean, I think it's a good point. Like, there's nothing really good that Halloween celebrates. Even the fact that you pass out candy. Candy's rotten for your teeth,
Yeah, and you want to get as much as you can. And
there's nothing
fill up
really,
on it.
yeah, there's nothing really good that it celebrates. And I have heard people say, well, on the good side, well, this is the only time of the year where you actually have people coming to you, so you can take this opportunity to reach out to them, to tell them about Jesus. And that's great, but I think throughout the whole year, you could probably reach out to as many people as you would, on that one night.
Yeah.
And personally, I mean, I'm not going to judge the people that do celebrate, but it seems like just my personal experience where on that holiday, it really is all about fear, starting from when I was 6 years old.
Yeah.
It started at that point.
That.
It was about fear. And it seems like there's nothing really godly in it at all. And I would rather just stay away from it. What I have seen what churches do, is on that night they'll have like a couple of
Like
friends
a fall
have already
harvest
they'll have a harvest
celebration or
night.
something.
Yeah, so they'll invite all the neighborhood kids there, and they'll have games, and then at the end they'll
Candy.
and candy, tons of candy, and then at the end they'll do like a play about Jesus, and I think that works because somebody mentioned that even the Christmas tree, it was a pagan tradition, but the Christians took it and made it their own. So they didn't want to just say, no, this is wrong, let's not do it. But they took it and they made it their own. And now Christmas is such a religious holiday.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the only holiday that they have not been able to take from pagan to Christian has been Halloween.
Yeah.
So maybe as the decades go along, maybe as the years go, we can take Halloween and, you know, take it back, or not take it back, but we can take it and do something good with it. So it becomes a good holiday.
Yes.
Not a scary one.
Versus like shutting it off. Because I think for kids, I mean, it's easier for us adults because we don't really care for the candy, you know?
Yeah.
And for us, we can, you know, it's cute. I'm not going to lie to you. I love seeing the little like babies or little kids in these cute little
Yeah.
like chicken outfits or this little mini. It's so cute. But, you know, there also is videos where the kid is walking up to a scary witch for candy, and even the kid's like, nope, I'm not going up there because it's scary, you know?
Yeah.
But as a kid, you want to be involved and you want to be included when all your friends are and they're, you know, making fun of you, and it's easier for adults. But when the kid is, you know, in school, you want to include. So I think that's a good middle ground. But for anyone who is celebrating, just be careful. Make sure whatever candy you're going to eat is not open. I set them up like that, right? Because there's so many stories with, like, if the
Yeah,
candy's open
like
or
with
needles or whatever.
needles
and
in
I don't
there
know who
or
in the world comes up with
poisoned.
this. Glass or whatever. But just be careful. And if you're not celebrating, just smile and start speaking in Russian. They can't say anything if you say no speak English. But yeah, so I thought that was really interesting. So I do like that they say, you know, Jesus celebrates peace and light, and
I just
when they get
think
scared.
we should present it in with a different attitude. Then, you know, like you were saying, Tati, the captions and the discussion that
Yes.
goes under it kind of makes people not want to hear the message, you
that's
know,
so
that
true.
it
Because then you're talking about
intended to give. Yeah.
exactly. You're talking about peace and light and love, but then your words aren't really peaceful.
Yeah.
And not really,
Yeah.
you know, saying
That's true.
love.
Yeah, I do know people who, you know, they're like, I'm all about everything that's holy, but they do come from a very extreme point of view. Like, if you celebrate it, you're,
Yes.
you know, you're not being Christ filled at all. And I just think it immediately shuts down the conversation.
They have very extremes. Yeah.
Yeah,
if you
it's
do
like
one
they're
thing.
they're saying basically, I'm not even going to talk about this. Like, I'm not open-minded. And I agree that Halloween is not a good holiday, but also I have learned that even when I hear from somebody who agrees with me about how extreme they are, like, don't even want to talk to people who celebrate it. It turns me away.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
you know, there definitely has to be a right approach to it. And
Yes.
if you do have that view and you want to show people or convince people that maybe this is not the best holiday for your kids to be celebrating, then you cannot go at it from a very
From
judgmental,
a scary, judgmental
nobody
way.
will listen to you. Nobody
true.
will listen to you.
Exactly. Yeah, when kids come to our door, I totally give them candy because I'm like, man, you've been walking around in that outfit and it's probably so itchy and uncomfortable. I just feel bad. Here you go. But yeah, I think, like you said, if you want to do that and take that stance, just make sure your stance and what you're saying matches your campaign, because then it doesn't really work. You're right. Okay,
Yeah.
so into churching.
Yes.
All into it. I'm excited because this is such a personal topic and something that my opinion has changed throughout the years just with doing two different types of churches. But we were talking about leadership. And so do you think there needs to be rules to be a leader? And so we all said yes,
Yes.
but I also want to explore a little bit of no and why I say no, or why you could think no.
Yes.
Dama, why do you think yes?
Okay, so I have two thoughts on it. So I do think that there needs to be a guideline and a standard and criteria that, you know, leadership would be, I don't want to say judged on, but would have to measure up to. Because they have to be an example of a good person, a good Christian, of a disciplined person, because that's what they're teaching other people. and that's what they're trying to teach younger people. They're looking up to them, and I think transparency is a huge thing for a leader.
Ooh,
And if they're-
elaborate on that a little more. Transparency.
if they want to teach on something, but they're hiding a completely different part of their life that does not
Match up
to what they're teaching, then you can't say, oh, this is just teaching. I think teaching is their personal life, every area of their life too.
That's a good point.
I think it all has to, match up to the living day-to-day life and the message that you're trying to teach younger people, especially younger people. Like older people will understand not everyone's ideal, or no one's ideal. Not everyone's, always at their best, but younger people, like you were saying last time,
Yes.
that guy that was looking up to the, one of the worship leaders, that he got really disappointed, and some people it can crush their faith, and especially
then they leave the church?
Not even younger, but even immature believers, I guess, or
Or
we're saying.
newcomers.
Because we can say, well, I'm not perfect. You can't be looking at me. But at the same time, even the Bible says those immature believers are like babies. When they come in, you have to be an ideal example because they're looking up to you. So if for those immature believers, you have to be a good example. But of course, we can't.
It's almost like if parents are telling their kids to be a certain way, but they're not following that in their personal life or in their behavior. It's like after a little while, kids will start saying, "Don't teach me that because you're not living that."
Yeah.
Whatever you're talking about, it does not apply to you. Like you don't want to apply it to yourself, but you're telling me to follow it. So that's one reason why I think that transparency is important, just because when something does come out, it'll hurt a lot of people's view at Christianity, at leadership within a church. But I do think it's important to understand that no one's ideal. Everyone has, everyone makes mistakes. Everyone does little things that they maybe didn't mean to do. And we do have to give leaders a break a little bit sometimes.
Yeah.
No,
So I
that's
don't
true.
expect them to be ideal. I don't
You can't expect perfection.
Yeah.
perfection. But at the same time, I do expect good character, discipline, and for their life to match up with their message. Because I do know one leader, and it bugs me all the time. I see his Facebook page, and I'm like, if people only knew.
Oh, man.
I was helping him with.
What do you
he's in
see
a
on the Facebook
huge-
page?
Okay, so I'm not gonna say names, and I'm not even gonna say a country, just so people don't try to put two and two together. There's one
investigating.
person who leads a ministry, and it's an orphan care ministry, and with other things adding up or being added to the ministry, so it's growing, and it's becoming a huge thing. They have thousands of people following their pages on Facebook, or two or three of their ministries, or pretty much their organization split up into 3 different ministries, and he's over everything. And when I was helping him with some translation writing stuff and just helping him out with, I don't want to say marketing, like promotional work in the beginning when it was small, he was like, oh, just say this, not this. I don't care. I just want it to sound good. And I was so disappointed in his character and the way he approached building his ministry. And then we started talking about more personal stuff, and he told me a lot of, that's why I don't want to call out names, just because,
No, that's
you
good.
know,
Yeah, don't call it.
yeah, but he did share a lot of things that were not, I don't know, even some non-Christian people.
That didn't line up with his mission and his
yes.
actions. Ooh, or
It was
his words.
It's not just like, oops, and a mistake here and there. It's like a completely different lifestyle from what
Wow.
he's teaching and what he's trying to grow within his ministry was a completely 2 different worlds. And I was like, how can this person, work on this ministry and lead so many people? They're new missionaries, and there are thousands and thousands of dollars are going through his ministry, and he is a completely different individual from what he wants to do as a leader
Wow.
of that ministry. I was so disappointed. And I'm like, I didn't know what to do. It bugged me. Like, I would go to sleep and I'm like, man, he just like got so many young people looking up to him, like, oh, this, like, I want to go on a mission trip, you know, with his group. And he's teaching all these girls to be, you know, good Christian leaders, and all these guys to be, you know, a good Christian man. And he's completely opposite of anything that he's teaching. And like,
that's tough for sure, because when you know them too, and then
Yeah.
they are contradicting what they're saying, that almost frustrates you to the point to where, like, I don't even
Like,
want to work with you because this
yeah,
isn't
and I
right.
stopped working with him just because it was bugging me so much. But at the same time, I see his Facebook page and it's growing, and I'm like, man, I know what's behind a lot of the stuff that he's doing. Like,
That mask.
finances are completely, like, the way he handles finances, there's no honesty, there's no transparency. There are completely different descriptions of things than what they're doing with the funds and stuff. And I'm like, man, do I tell someone? Do I just ignore? Do I let it go? And I knew that I couldn't work with them anymore. But at the same time, I'm like, I'm seeing them grow into this huge organization or this huge ministry, and he's the leader. And I see him going on stages of different churches and talking about how wonderful that ministry is and how God has been speaking, you know, has been speaking to him about this and this, and God inspired him to do this and this, and it's all for God, for the glory of God. And then I talked to him about a lot of those same areas of the ministry that he's speaking about, and it's completely different. So and I know, like, next leader I'm seeing, you know, so active and so great, you know, on Facebook. I see their pages. I'm like, I wonder what he's doing, you know,
Yeah.
if there's anything else like that out there.
Makes you
know,
question it.
Yeah, with
I
other
think
ministries.
Eventually, like, those things do come out, you know? So I don't think you can hide, I guess, hypocrisy for a long time.
It's hard to hide two personalities for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, one's gonna overpower the other because you're playing or you're acting in one of them, and whichever one is the
Yeah.
true one is just gonna at one point get overthrown by your actual personality and your
But
characteristics.
then what threw me off is a lot of leaders know, because he's gone through a situation in his life, in his personal life, that was kind of in an open, and it was not what a Christian person should put out, you know,
Yeah.
as far as the example. And they're like, oh, but he's doing so well in ministry. He's changing so many lives. Like, why would we bring something that's not part of his ministry and let that ruin it? So a lot of, like, leaders he works with know it, and they don't think it's a big deal. So that's why I think standards are important. Like,
Yeah.
if you don't have this and this, or if you have this and this, you cannot be a leader. Even if you have leadership abilities, if you have those qualities that leadership, you know, in church needs from you, you just can't, just because you're not, you know, matching up to the, you know, whatever you're teaching.
I think that can apply to work, to anything. If the leader, whether it's your manager or the boss, is not transparent, is not, you know, doesn't have standards, then you can't follow them. It's going to be hard for you to listen to them, to respect them, to think they're asking me to do this, but they're not doing it. So if you're going to walk the walk, you really need to talk the talk. And if you're going to be in a leadership position, I think you almost have to prepare yourself. And I think one of the main things you have to do is prepare your family too. Like, I'm leading, which means transparent, which means that includes you guys. So, you know how sometimes you hear pastor's kid? That's like sometimes a bad term, like, oh, that's pastor's kid. Sometimes it's like good, but then sometimes you're like, well, it's always the quiet ones. You know, you hear those saying, because it's, and maybe it's the pressure that gets them to that point, but it's absolutely a whole family thing, because the kids are looked at, the mom, which, I mean, as a leader, if you're, you know, you're asking people to listen to you and how you teach and lead, and so you have to be ready for that. And I think maybe some leaders don't think about that.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe that's the disconnect. Maybe
Yeah.
they're not thinking, oh, wait, it's not just my, you know, my moment when I see these people. It's my whole life is part of it.
Yeah, it is interesting to see that people kind of scramble for those top positions, but there definitely needs to be some accountability there. And the Bible does say don't put people who are new believers in that position. It says in I think this was 2 Timothy, or it says a church leader must not be a new believer because he might become proud and the devil would cause him to fall. And I so many people scramble for that position, but it comes with such a great responsibility.
A lot.
Yeah.
And the Bible
Absolutely.
says that God will require more out of those people because they led other people. And it's such, you have to be so careful in that role. And you can't just think, oh, I can do this and, you know, I'm fine. It really, that's why it lists out. Do you guys know that part where it lists out all the qualifications for a deacon and a pastor? How he has
a
to have a
lot.
good reputation. Yeah, he has to be faithful to his family. He has to have, his kids have to be under control and respectful. And
Because the way you lead your family is a very good idea of how you're going to lead a
Yeah.
church.
Yeah.
It's a very good example. So if you're not leading your family the right way, whether you know someone's struggling in the family is okay. Like if you have
Yeah.
a child that's maybe has a little bit more difficult way on taking a certain instruction or is a little bit different, that's okay. It's just how you deal with that. Because you also, like you said, they're not perfect. You can't expect them to have angelic children that don't, you know, breathe too loud. You just can't. You know, they're people, but
Yeah.
it's how they
Yeah.
deal with that and live with that. That you're right. I mean, that's why it's in there because
yeah,
it's a
I
good
think
idea of it.
there's all these qualifications for leaders because God is, in a way, he's protecting them, but he's also protecting the church and the people who follow those leaders.
Yeah.
Because I know so many people who have been hurt, really hurt, because of leaders in the
Leaders,
church.
yeah.
And of course, we have to be merciful, and that's what I learned as well. You really have to be patient and merciful with them. But it's just, it would be a lot less pain and so much easier if leaders held themselves to that standard as well. Because a lot of young, you know, maybe new believers follow them. And if they are not holding themselves to a standard, it says here too, they must be well respected and have integrity. If they're not holding themselves to that standard, they can hurt a lot of people like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You are right.
And the responsibility is to be the shepherd. And if you think about shepherd's qualities and responsibilities, he can be a high maintenance person that will want to sit around and read a book. You know, you have work to do and you have to be alert. You have to be.
I can't be a
you know,
leader then. I love to read books.
I'm just saying that there are qualities that a shepherd must have to be a shepherd.
And I think one of the most important ones for leaders is they have to be a servant. I think that's leader equals servant.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing for scrambling for that position. People who want to be, you know, leaders, maybe they think, oh, with it comes power and respect. No, with it comes a lot of hard, dirty work.
Yes.
A lot
Getting
of
your hands
criticism.
dirty, yep.
Exactly. A lot of patience with people. I think that a good leader is someone who is a good servant.
Yes.
And
Go
I
ahead.
love to see like different pastors. Let's say I'm visiting a church and they're doing like lunch or coffee, you know, hang out for everyone after church. And when a pastor does something that a simple non-leadership work, you know, bring coffee.
Oh, yes.
You know,
Yeah. Do
bring
a little
ice,
bit of
clean you up a little bit.
hospitality and that. Yeah.
I love that. It makes him more of a leader in my eyes
Yes.
than
More
if he was
approachable,
like,
too,
yeah,
right?
on stage and I'm done, you know.
Do this for me,
Yeah.
do this for me.
I like that. If you're just joining us, it's Between Us Girls Radio. We're talking about churching, and this is part 2. Churching and how to do it and how we all do church. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back.
I lived hard on the wire, hand in the fire for so long. But you showed me better, a new kind of love. It's ever the one I want. I'm lifting you higher, higher. There's nothing that I'd rather do. A sweet elevation of praises. There's no one I love more than you. I never knew a love like this before. The kind of life that I cannot find on my own. I've seen the world, but I have never been so sure that I want your heart. God, I just wanna be where you are. Where you are. I just wanna be where you are. Like nothing I've seen nest of dreams, don't come close. I've never known better than living like this. I cannot resist you, Lord. I'm lifting you higher, higher. There's nothing that I'd rather do. A sweet elevation of praises. There's no one I love more than you. I never knew a love like this before. The kind of life that I cannot find on my own. I've seen the world, but I have never been so sure that I want your heart. God, I just wanna be where you are. Where you are. I just wanna be where you are. Where you are. I just wanna be where you are. And after all this time, with you by my side, I can't imagine what it'd be like on my own. I made up my heart, this love is all I've got, and you're the only one I know worth living for. A sweet elevation of praises. There's no one I love more than you. I never knew a love like this before. The kind of life that I cannot find on my own. I've seen the world, but I have never been so sure that I want your heart. God, I just wanna be where you are. Where you are. I just wanna be where you are. Where you are. I just wanna be where you are.
I'm good.
All right, Between Us Girls Radio is back, and thank you
Yay.
for being with us. Wanted to real quick kind of fill you in. This is Churching Part 2, and from Part 1, we talked about kind of some rules and different styles of church, and one of the churches that we had visited, or I had visited, and we had talked about is one that had men and women sit separately. And so one of our listeners has a little, opinion and perspective because they go to a church where they sit separately, correct? Men and women sit separately.
So I received a message from someone who was listening to the last talk show that we had, and on the point of sitting separately on separate sides, she said that it's up until last generation, like 2 generations ago. So I guess maybe our parents, maybe even
Okay.
after them, between like us
Like
and our parents.
grandparents?
No, like parents.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. No churches sat together. It was always separated. And
churches sat men and
somehow
women
modern changes in a church allowed
I don't remember that.
for
Oh, you mean in their church specifically?
no, like in general in Christianity, it was always separated. So
I've
back
never had that before.
back
I've
in
never
the
heard my
day,
parents saying that.
and
That's interesting.
because
That
I
must be
do
from
remember
her
our church
perspective.
was kind of mixed, so we didn't have that in Ukraine. But I'm talking about like when our parents were little, or maybe our grandparents.
Okay,
So
gotcha. So
more of a
Back in the
modern
day. That
twist to the church
yeah.
started like, it was kind of like changing standards for church. So they started blending congregations into like one big group versus men and women. So it's like congregation versus, we have men here and women here. So, and families could sit together. She's saying that she does kind of like an idea of people sitting separately just because that's when women can bond with other women. That's when you have your fellowship with women.
That's
and
true.
man can mingle with man, and they have their side, and they have
which is probably not good during the sermon, but I see what
yeah,
you mean.
but
I see what you
in
mean.
between and
In
like
that setting. Okay.
yeah. So instead of just having a family at home and coming there and like having your family here, or this couple never talks to anyone else, that's their opportunity for men to be with men, to women, for women to be with women, and kind of bond a little bit.
That makes sense.
that
That's a
was-
good perspective.
Yeah, so that's why she doesn't mind sitting separately, just because she's saying it's her girl time.
That's
Yeah.
interesting. Do we know what type of not Christianity, but what type of division. Is that what you would call it? Like Baptist or
It's
do
a
you know what type?
Pentecostal church.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we've never been, I mean, not that I remember, even my grandparents, because I remember when I visited the church that had men and women sit separately, both times. One time I was with my brother, and then the other time was when I was with SMBS. And I asked my parents about it because it was so mind-blowing to me. I had never seen that before. I had seen places where, if it's not relatives, but the fact that it's even siblings, they had just sit separately. We've never had that in our family. So I wonder if it's more of maybe, you know, a while back, more Pentecostal churches had that and just recently changed. Because I remember that was very different for me. Like I said, my grandparents never, not even on my mom's side. And my grandmother, when we go see her, we wear skirts in the yard. So that's, you know,
Really?
I mean, she
So I
asks
wonder
it-
if they sat separately.
No.
No?
I mean, I asked my mom, you know, growing up, you know, and I mean, she would, you know, remember at least in teenage, she said, no. I mean, it's just, my grandma lives in a village still. She doesn't live in a town. She still lives in a Sulul, you know. So it's so interesting to me.
Yeah,
but I
so
like that
maybe it
perspective
is.
too, the fact that you get to break out of your shell and your safety zone of family.
Mm-hmm.
Because you have to sit, maybe someone's lonely or is scared to reach out, and you get that opportunity to maybe pray with them, or maybe just, sometimes you just need someone to sit by too, you know, just to like, okay, this is nice. You know, I don't feel...
Yeah,
So
I see that.
I like that. Okay. That's interesting. I also, I also had an encounter being, so at that Bible school, you have people from all over the states and different countries. And I had classmates that were from a very conservative church, and they were married. And the husband, so they were married in Bible school. The husband wouldn't speak to any girls in the class. And I don't mean like speak in like a conversation one-on-one, as in like if I asked, so we would sit
Like,
family
not at
style.
all?
Not at all. Like we would sit family style for lunch and breakfast. So, you know, we're all sitting at this long table. And I remember asking, he was by the salt or something, and I said, hey, can you pass the salt? And he wouldn't look at me, wouldn't respond. And I for a second thought, I'm like, man, is he mad at me? Like, what's going on? You know, because you think, oh man, what did I do? And I asked again, didn't say anything. And then his wife took it and passed it to me and said, here you go. And I was so confused, very, very confused. But, so before I got married, I'm like, that's so strange. Like, why? What? I mean, it's just a female. You know, you have to get used to it. Being married, I think, at least for them, maybe that's his way to make sure that he never crosses the line with another female. Whether it's in a conversation, whether it's words that are used, whether it's a perspective of the female taking it. But maybe that's his way to keep his mind, you know, and everything. And there can never be a question of, you know, are you being, you know, shady?
Yeah.
And at first I'm like, huh? Like, that's so strange. But then on the other hand, I'm thinking, well, you know what? They were very kind, and his wife is very kind, and it's not that she's telling him to do that. Not at all. They're wonderful people. They, you know, if you look at their pictures, it's not like they're very, you know, conservative with everything. No, it's regular, you know, very neutral, not too risky, not too conservative. It's just normal, you know, normal family. It was just very interesting to me. And I think, on the other hand, I'm like, you know what? If that keeps him from crossing any boundaries, good for him.
What about her, his wife? Would she talk to guys?
She talks to guys. She talked to you know, opposite sex. It was no problem at all. I mean, not that she would, you know, stand one-on-one, but so it was very interesting. So I almost think, you know, at that church, maybe that's like a crazy extra precaution, but I mean, if that keeps, you know, someone from overstepping.
If like, I think if a girl whose husband is unfaithful, if she just heard that, she would be like, I wish my husband was like that,
Right?
you know?
Exactly. I wish he
That
did
would
that
be-
so no boundary was crossed.
Yeah, for them, so maybe in the end it is good, but I feel like if you are that type of person, then you're not going to be a very good leader in your ministry.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like, because that requires a lot of, you know, reaching out and building relationships and counseling women as well, not just men.
And you can't exclude them either. You have to, because that's a very big part of the church.
It's
the members.
really being mature and really learning to talk to those people as if they are your sisters.
Yes.
Not a potential, you know, somebody that you could have an affair with, but really looking at them as if they're, But that requires, I think, a lot of spiritual and emotional
lot.
maturity.
And I'm not married, so I don't know, but I think it requires a lot of work at home. Learning to trust, to communicate.
Trust is a big part of it.
If something
Absolutely.
bothers his wife while he's a leader and he's active and talking to, females about whatever issues they have, and, it's a little chat, they need to make sure that they communicate about it. And there's nothing like, she's not carrying anything like,
Yes,
I'm
nothing
unhappy
is-
about this,
yeah.
I hate this,
Nothing
I
is
feel
held
like it would
in.
be a lot of work in a marriage to keep everything, peaceful and...
Yeah, I think your characteristic, like you said, your characteristic has to line up with the leader, which means counseling and talking and leading everyone. So I like that, Alina. I wanted to see what you guys thought about female pastors. We don't have a lot of those. I
Yeah, we
think the
don't.
only one that I know of, the two, mainly because they're the most popular, are Joyce Meyer and Christine Kane.
Yeah.
So they're they're kind of similar in the I guess, their accents are very different, which is so funny because one is Australian, one's Southern, but they're very like on fire. They're very
Yeah. Yes.
outgoing, very like, I have all this passion, I want to share it, which is perfect for that. But in the Slavic community, we don't have a lot of female pastors. We don't have a lot of female leaders.
That's true, but I started seeing a lot of that on West Coast, and I don't know, I love it.
Okay.
Just because it's so new to our community.
It
And
is.
we feel like if we have skills and we have qualities of a leader, we have to like suppress them within us. We can't really go out and be a leader that we have an ability to be. And when I see someone stepping over all those, Slavic standards,
Yep,
and
like
becoming that
traditions
leader,
of-
and
yeah.
I don't think she should be the number one, spiritual leader at home. Husband is still a husband, and he's still, head of the household in a spiritual sense too. But when she's practicing her leadership skills and helping women with, that, I love it. I don't know. I like seeing that.
It's interesting. Maybe it's a cultural thing, but in different African cultures, female pastors it's a lot more common for female pastors. A lot more common. And so it's
So
interesting.
are they pastors together? Her and her husband?
The
Or-
ones that I've seen, no. She is the head pastor of the church.
Oh,
Now,
and what does he do?
He helps her, but she's, he's not like a vice pastor. What would you call that? Like
Co-pastor?
Co-pastor,
Yeah,
yeah.
he's not a co-pastor. She's the head of the pastor, or she's the head pastor of the church, and he helps her with it. So it's so interesting to me because, like you said, in a marriage structure, the man is the spiritual leader, not because the woman's not capable, because of the certain
It's
gifts
God's
and talents.
design,
Exactly, the
too.
way he's designed emotionally and spiritually and mentally to lead.
Yeah.
But
I have to, if we are yes on
for
this,
female pastors,
I am a no.
really?
Yeah, I think I'm more open-minded to a lot of other controversies that kind of divide our churches. But with the whole female pastor thing, I do listen to Joyce Meyer, and that's what kind of makes this complicated for me, because I think she's a great teacher. But I know some people that I know are strongly against her because she calls herself a pastor, and that's that's her stance on it. But the leader of the family, of the church, should be the man. I believe that's how God designed it, and that's what God does. When God designed Adam and Eve, he designed the man to be the leader of the family. And then also in the New Testament, it says that women should not teach men. And I know people say,
Where does it say that?
I will pull up the exact scripture,
That's
but
interesting. I've never heard that before.
yeah, it says women should not teach men. And I mean, people can say maybe that's a cultural thing, but I think that women naturally, I feel like like the Bible says that, part of the woman's curse was that she will try to overpower the man. I feel like because we have organization abilities, we can be good leaders. But should we be? I don't necessarily think so, no.
That's interesting. I don't know. I don't agree with that. I think that just like work is very different than family, just like your ministry should absolutely be separate from family. I
Yes,
don't
I
think
do agree with that.
leading a church should be the same as leading, I don't think it should be one. I think you absolutely have to separate it, because then you are you are taking on a role that you're not designed to do. No one is designed to have that as your family. You are designed to lead that, but that you are not the father of all those people.
Well, this is 1 Timothy chapter 2. This is when Paul is specifically talking about the church and leadership in the church and the structure of the church. And he says, I do not permit a woman to teach or to assume authority over a man. She must be quiet. I mean, it's kind of harsh, but he does say, I don't permit a woman to teach or assume authority over men. It's not even to teach, it's to assume authority. She should not even have authority over a man. I don't, based on that and based on how God just structured the family and the order of the church, I don't believe that female pastors are God's perfect design. I don't think necessarily it's a sin, but I do not believe that it is God's perfect design for the church.
Well, I do like to see couples like Pastor Vitaly and Pastor Olga, their husband and wife, and their pastors together. I'm not sure how I feel about just a woman or just a wife being a pastor and the husband's just, there or an assistant. I do like when they're pastoring as a couple together. And I do like female pastors or, let's say, leaders lead women. And that's what I see from few leaders on the West Coast. And they do have amazing women's ministries.
Yes.
And their pastor's wife. And let's say if she's a pastor's wife and she has responsibilities at church, she'll normally work with women. He'll work with men, and together they're pastor, wife, and a husband. And sometimes she would preach, but he is the leader of the church.
Yeah.
But then at the same time, he's not doing confessions and all these conversations with women just because he's a pastor. She's a pastor too. She steps in and she counsels and she listens to them. She has one-on-one conversations. So I feel like it creates more of like a safer environment for, working with an opposite sex or, a different gender, just because he has a wife that can do exact same thing he can. And they kind of, I do like that. I'm not sure how I feel about just a woman being a pastor and her husband not doing anything.
And a woman ministering to women, that's completely biblical. That's totally biblical. So I guess, and also, I mean, I know that ministry and family, should be separate, but you can't do that. You really can't separate ministry and family. Your ministry is part of your life, and you're going to take home what you learn there, how you grow there. That's going to bleed into your home life. And I don't see how, if she's a female pastor and she's leading the church and she's a leader and everybody kind of respects her and comes to her and her husband's kind of in the background, I don't really see how that cannot influence their home life. That's so much part of their life. How can it not influence them?
I don't agree with that, because I think if you're a leader somewhere and if it affects your husband at home, whether it's church or work, I didn't realize that verse existed. That's so interesting, because even in the context of it, it's pretty clear for the woman to not lead or assume authority over the man, which is so like, those are strong words.
Those are strong words. It's very controversial.
I do think there's specifically in a church, like you said, because there's a design to it, because of the way the man leads. The reason why I think you absolutely have to separate church and your ministry, not in the sense of how you do it, because again, transparency is a big part of leadership, but in the fact that you are not a father figure in the church. That's not your role. The father figure is the Father. You have the Son and the Holy Spirit. You are not the father figure in a church. You are simply the messenger in between Jesus and not the messenger, but you are the one who is teaching them the instructions of
like a bridge.
Jesus.
Yeah.
So you're not literally, I don't mean that you have to have a specific gift that then you translate it to all your members, but I mean, you, like you said, you're the bridge. But if you take on the father figure, that's the same thing as a wife taking on, or a mom taking on a father figure when the father is there. You're taking on a role that you're not supposed to. So the same thing with the pastor. So I think why you have to separate it in the sense of how you lead is because then you're going to do your role the wrong way. if you pretend, or if you're taking on the role of father, you're not doing the role of a pastor or of a leader. Same thing at work. And I think leadership should absolutely bleed through anything else, or the way you do leadership. If you're going to be a pastor and you have another job as well, then you absolutely have to lead the same way you're a pastor, because you can't be two different, leaders in different aspects of your life. But I think if you bleed your family life into work, that's a problem. You're going to have to choose at one point. You're going to have to put someone last, and that's difficult. That's very difficult. And then you're put in a rough position. But that is so interesting, that verse. I've never read that before. And maybe I have, but I almost didn't think about it in a female pastor leadership. I mean, that's a strong stance.
It is.
That's not like, I don't want you to, at home, like I don't want to maybe. It's very like, do not permit, and this is NIV.
Yeah.
I do not permit a woman to teach or to assume authority. And maybe, I don't know. I mean, it's hard to look into that further, but maybe almost I can see assume authority, because at that point you're thinking, well, the man is also not trying to be prideful and say, no, I'm right just because I'm a man. But that's very interesting.
But honestly, well, I'm pretty involved in my youth as well. And sometimes we, like the youth leader allows the girls to share a message or whatever with everybody. But thinking about it, and I love sharing. I can put together, honestly, I'm not going to be shy about this. I can put together a sermon really well. I can. I mean, that's just, that's
I
like,
believe it, girl.
I feel like my strengths are, organizing and speaking and writing. Those are my strengths. But I love doing it. I love sharing. It's more like a discussion, and we talk, and I love doing that. But I did come to the point where we kind of had a discussion I had a discussion with a friend, and he was telling me how, what he believes on this verse. And I thought about it as well. And looking at the verse, there's no reason for me to, if you take it point blank, that's what it means. Like, women should not teach. So I am not against, I've now taken the stance that I'm not against giving up that privilege, the opportunity to share a message with the youth. I'm not against it. I'll give it up. If that's what the Bible requires me to do, I'm not going to hold, grip it with both hands. I'll give it.
Hold on to it.
Yeah, I'll give it up.
I have a question for you. Do you cover your head when you pray?
No, we don't do that at our church.
The reason I asked that for you specifically, because that's also a verse in the New Testament.
Yes.
And it doesn't say when you sing or just walking around. It just says, women, when you pray, cover your head.
So I think that's a whole different topic. And
the reason I mention it is because, if you choose to take this one with a hard stance, not you specifically, but I mean like people, if they choose to take this one with a hard stance but not this one, it's like, well, if you're going to take a hard stance on that, you almost have to do it on all verses.
Not necessarily, because, just
in
a couple.
New Testament, at least.
Yeah, well, just a couple of points about the head covering. I think that's more cultural than this one even. Like talking about the head covering, was more of a cultural issue than this one. But also, when Paul talks about head covering, head coverings are mentioned only once in the entire Bible, and it's during that time when Paul is writing to the Corinthians. So it's even more evidence that it was cultural. But second of all, the idea that women should not assume authority over man, that's a theme throughout the Bible. God set that standard from the beginning. So for him to say that, it kind of goes along with how God designed families and authority and leadership overall. So, but maybe that's a very elementary answer. I'm not a theologian, so I'm just kind of going off the top of my head.
I know. I'm just thinking, that's just so interesting to me. Like, that's such a strong stance on
you should
leadership.
Look it up, maybe do some research, maybe ask some of your leaders or pastors in your church, and then maybe you could come back.
We don't have any female pastors.
You mean
just any,
any leaders, and ask them about that verse, and maybe next week, that could be our challenge for the week, and maybe next week come back, and because that's a very interesting place, and maybe just discuss it.
Because I guess maybe, and I'm thinking more of someone like Christine Caine. I think she's absolutely in the right to be a pastor and a leader, but she's also trying to go for women, for victims that have been through human trafficking. Yeah. So I feel like if there was a man speaking to them, it would be much harder for them to take advice.
It's different if
Counsel from
if
that.
it's she's speaking to a woman.
Yeah.
I think that's totally
That's the-
appropriate and
that's the
totally
difference.
biblical.
Yeah.
That is so interesting. That just blew my mind. I guess I've just never realized the context. And if you're thinking female
Yeah.
leadership or female pastor.
I mean, maybe there's a different interpretation. So I would love to hear.
Yeah,
what-
but I think it's also important, like if a woman does become a leader and talks to so many people, I think that there are standards for a woman leader too. Like, let's say, I don't think she can be a single woman pastoring a church, because you have to teach wives, you have to teach
Yeah.
mothers, you have to, and I think being a single female pastor, it creates room for, we're emotional.
Yeah.
We want to be happy and we make mistakes while,
We're very
looking
much
for
into
that.
our
Yeah.
emotions. Yep.
Yeah.
That's true.
And
And-
that was the other point. When Paul talks about the qualifications for leaders, he assumes it's a man leader. He doesn't say he should be, he or she should be respectable, have good children. He doesn't say he or she. He only says he.
Well, that's almost
pronoun.
throughout the whole Testament too. When he says man, he's not just saying,
I think
man,
it's
male,
the
but he
assumption,
means
though.
human.
But it's the assumption that it would be a male with a wife and children, not either or,
Yeah.
not a human
I
being.
think if there's understanding between husband and wife, that she's not above him, she's she's a leader, she's in ministry, and she's not trying to be above him at home, and he's okay with it. He gave her his blessing. Maybe it's not considered her being above him as far as in status in ministry. And if she comes home and kids are fed and she's a mother and a wife at home, maybe
I don't know.
Yeah,
I
if he
still,
blesses
I
her
still
for
don't
it.
agree with that.
I
That's
don't know.
interesting. Yeah, that's.
I'm not against it. Like,
I'm definitely not
I'm
against it.
okay
I
I
seeing
think
it.
I am against it. So it's a yes, just no.
yeah.
Well, let me tell you what I saw in a church that I was attending in Florida. It was, and it's been in the news, so I'm not gonna hide names. It's Paula White and her husband
Who's
Randy
Paula
White.
Do you have a little background on her? I just don't know who it is.
She was a pastor of a huge church in Tampa, Florida, and the church is Without Walls International Church. And
Okay,
it was a
gotcha.
mega church.
Okay.
It's as big as Buckhead Church or Passion City. It's huge.
Okay.
And she was a senior pastor, and her husband was like assistant pastor. And she was, on the go and on a TV and, a leader. And then one day, she announces that they walked out on stage holding hands, and they said, "We're divorcing. We just wanted to share with our family. We were like our children. We're like your parents that decided to be honest and transparent about what's going on. We're divorcing because this marriage is taken away from my ministry. And I cannot be a pastor that I was designed to be, and I cannot use all my abilities and all my qualities to the fullest. While, when I have to be a wife at home." And we have an understanding, and Randy blessed me for, the next step, whatever,
See,
stage
I
of my
think-
pastoring. That felt so wrong. I'm like, oh my
Yeah.
gosh.
Wow.
And I'm sitting there and I'm like, who
that's
needs
tough.
a pastor that will throw away their marriage and all that, the design of
The
a family,
commitment to- yeah.
that God created to be a pastor, that's wrong. When she makes a decision that she can be a pastor, that
But
she should be without,
I love her excuse. It seems like she's totally trying to justify it. Like,
And-
I'm doing it for the church.
and half of the church was clapping, like, "Oh, we're with you, we'll get through this." And Randy gave her a hug, and I'm like, what's wrong with this?
It's tough. It's tough
Yeah.
when leaders divorce, whether
Yeah.
it's man or
That's just setting a
or
bad
woman.
example.
Yeah.
It's tough. Not necessarily that they're divorcing from a married couple or from a marriage. I mean, because that's what divorce means. But I mean more of like breaking a commitment.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
that's breaking a union that was designed to not be broken. You know,
Yeah.
it's like, oh man.
And then she keeps pastoring, and he's still an assistant. But she's like, now I can go anywhere I want to go. I don't have to worry about my schedule at home, and everything that
And
a wife.
what happened after?
She's still a pastor. She still goes to all these huge conferences and speaks. And then she wrote a book for divorced women, how to, live a best life possible without, limitations, stuff like that. So that's one thing that I think should not be happening if you are a female pastor and you neglect your status at home. And if not even neglect,
both ways
but
too. If you're a male too, for sure. But yes, no, definitely. If you're not doing your job, I'm sorry, it's not a job. If you're not doing your role at home, something's not right.
Yeah.
And I think the longer it goes, the more you'll feel like, okay, this is not where I belong, at home with the family. I'm a pastor. So I think as soon as that starts, you start losing that balance between ministry and home. You cannot be in a leadership position. It'll bring you to a horrible ending, and especially for a woman. So that's one example that I remember when I thought, okay, women should not be pastors. This is just so bad. Yeah. But then when I see like great female leaders, I'm like, thank God we have them, because I just receive their word better than I would from a man on certain topics, certain things that she understands, in a life of a woman. And
that
she explains it, And I don't know. But I do like to see couples pastoring together and being pastors together.
That's true, because they both are on the same level and they're both helping 50-50 of their congregation to understand. Because just like if someone's military and they're talking to someone who used to be military, is military, or someone who used to have an addiction and the person talking to them went through an addiction, you're going to be able to relate much better. I know those are extreme examples, but still, woman to woman is easier than man to woman to explain certain things. I like that. So with all of these different types of church and leaders and everything, I think one thing that we can agree on, and I like the additions, so you both will have to add it, but what we've come to realize is church is not in walls. So church, yes, that is one aspect of it. And it's very important because it's a fellowship and it's a growing and it's something that feeds your soul. It shouldn't be the only source, but it's just, you're getting together with people that feel the same and passionately about something, and that's their driving force, that faith, and that's what they love so much. So with anything, that's always good, but specifically with church, definitely important, but it's not within walls. And so what we've kind of come to figure out and discover is that church must be an everyday lifestyle that is your way of showing the love of Christ to people that already know him or don't know him at all. And it's not only within walls.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, it's more important that as a church, and even the word church in the Old Testament, the exact word and how it was translated, it means ecclesia, the word church, and it's the direct definition is an assembly or called out ones. The definition of it is people. It's not a building.
Yeah, and it's funny because that's exactly what I have on my screen. I was just gonna say that it meant assembly of people.
Yeah, it's definitely people, and loving each other, because that's how Christ said that the world will know who you are, my disciples. Yes. Loving each other and serving the community. That's the most important thing. And if you have a building, that's great.
Yeah, you're lucky. You got very lucky because not many people have buildings to where they can gather. I like that.
And I also wanted to add that I think the church should be a healing place and accept people to come to know the Christ and to come and, receive healing and start growing, instead of expecting people to somehow get there before they come to church and to kind of fit into the church standard. It should be the place of comfort for those who are looking for comfort, healing for those that are broken. So we should accept people and help them grow and not expect them to be perfect when they come in. Yeah. And it's very important because a lot of people look for that in a church and they leave because they don't receive it.
Yeah.
Come with what you have, right?
Yes.
Come as you are. No, just exactly as you are. So I like that. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Again, this was Between Us Girls Radio. We're so glad you were here. We talked about churching, and I think what we'll end it with is ecclesia, is what we'll call it. I like that. I hope I said that right. Yeah. But have a wonderful week. We can't wait to be back with you again, and we hope you enjoyed it. Hope you enjoyed our churching part 2. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.